So here we are back at the code samples, and the first one we're going to do, and don't worry, we're going to take a look at these individually here, is using files, multiple files, ints and strings. So we're going to cover most everything of what you're going to need to know in general about working with files as inputs and outputs here, and we're going to take them in small little pieces. So this one is, and I apologize for the name there, well-made general category, but we'll meet you over here at the actual code. So starting at the top, you'll notice we still have IOStream. I'm going to mention that because just this last week somebody forgot it, and I thought, it's probably because I haven't mentioned it in a little while. On line number 3, you'll notice our new include. There is our fstream library, so that has to be included here. Otherwise, we cannot do our file operations. So otherwise, just using namespace, and here we go into our main. So first and foremost, it's here on line number 8. You will notice that we have our if stream, and we're calling it in file. This is the one I mentioned before. Input file is how you'll see it in the text. In file, I shortened it here inadvertently. So what we are doing is we are declaring an in file, so an if stream type, and we are calling it in file. So that is our variable name. So from here on out, whenever we want to refer to the file that we're reading from, we refer to it as in file when we're referencing it in our code. Line number 9, I have 3 integer values that I'm going to read in from the file, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add them and get the sum. I am not, in this program, I am not taking any inputs from the user. So all of the inputs that generate the outputs are coming from a file. They have no need for the user to do anything here with the program. So first, if we're going to use a file, we have to open it. And you can see that here on line number 13, infile.open. So infile, that's the name of my variable. .open is going to open that file. Inside of my parens is going to be, remember, in double quotes, because this is a string for numeric data.txt. Now, I can take a look at numeric data.txt. That's right here. Let me make sure you can see that. Yep, that's right here on the left-hand side. And I have 100, 200, 300, 400, and you guessed it, 500. So that is my numeric data. So next, we're going to take a look at reading those in from our file. So lines number 15, really that's the comment, but 16, 17, and 18 are going to be me reading those values in. So in file, and then you'll see the greater than character. So you can think of it as, that's coming in from the outside, the same way that we would use a cin. It has the same greater than characters there. And value 1. So what I'm saying is take from the file, and this is going to be the first line on that file, and read that value into value 1. On line number 17, I'm going to say read from the file and save that value into value 2. This is maintained by C++. When you are using a file, those access points, line number 1, line number 2, line number 3, line number 4, that is all maintained by C++. Here in 276, we will not mess with essentially the playhead. We won't be able to move that read head up and down, so that we can access line number 1 this time, we can access line number 30 next time, we can access line number 15 next time. That's not how we're going to do that here in 276. What we are going to do instead is simply use it sequentially: 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, all the way till we're done reading our file in. So line number 18 follows that very same thing. So because we started on line number 0, this goes to 1, then 2, and that value 3, is going to be read in from the file. Now you'll notice here on line number 21, I have infile.close, and that's in an empty paren. When you open a file, Google Docs has destroyed us for this idea. on a Windows system, on a Mac system, on a server system, when you open a file, there's a problem as far as the system is concerned. When you open a file, that means the contents of this file might change. So if some other process or if some other user wants to come through and open that file, if you're in a server environment, this is what happens. You will say, this is a read-only copy, and the copy is opened and locked for editing, because in a traditional file environment, again, Google has destroyed you for this, but in a traditional file environment, it's impossible to say, if I let 3 different processes open the same file, which file is the best file now? Honestly, they're all wrong, because somebody might have a file, open it, and not change it. Okay. Somebody might have a file, open it, and add to it. And the third process can have a file and open it and delete from it. Which one of those 3 files is the right one now? The one that never changed, the one that has additions, or the one that has subtractions? And the real answer is none of them are good anymore, because all of them represent a change in whatever the state of that file was. So this is the best, you know, use of a file when you are doing your programming here. You open it, you do your file operation, and you close it as concisely in as few lines of code as possible. So that way the file is only open when you need it, it is closed when you don't need it, and another process can come through and have access to that file. So line number 13, open file. 16, 17, 18, read from file. 21, close file. That way we get the data we need, then we return this file so other processes have an opportunity to read it, to delete from it, to add to it, whatever. So on line number 24, now that I've read in value 1, value 2, and value 3, I'm going to add those together and save that into sum. So what's going to happen? I'll just go ahead and run this. And we can see it's right here. Data pulled from numeric data.txt. The numbers are 100, 200, 300, and their sum is 600. My basic math ability tells me that that is true. So we have opened a file, we have read integers in, and now we have closed the file. Our next file operation here starts on line number 43. So I've got that highlighted for you here. Here on line 43, I'm going to infile.open again. I do not need another variable to be able to do this. I've already got my variable in file, which means that it's open and available for a file stream. So I can open a different file this time around. So this time I'm opening names dot, is it .dat? .txt, namesdata.txt. That's where I got the data from. And if we look at namesdata.txt, I have Bert, Ernie, and Dr. Teeth in there. I have a little guy. We watched Sesame Street this morning, so that's where the names come from. So back here on my CPP file, I've opened on line number 43. I have opened namesdata.txt. Now what I'm going to do is read in file, name number 1. You'll notice name number 1 is a string up here. So I'm reading strings from my file into a string type data variable here in my program. Name number 1, I'm going to read in name number 2. Remember, C++ keeps that essentially the playhead moving for me. So the first time it opens the file to get data, it's the first line, line number 0. The second time it's going to open for reading, it's on line number 1. That's the second line. The next time it's on line number 2, the third line of data. So now I have read in from that file 1, 2, 3, just like I would with the cin object that we have done previously in non-file operations. So here is the data that we pulled from namesdata.txt. Here are the names, and you'll notice that I have outputted name 1, name 2, and name 3. But if you look at my output, something here is wrong. You'll see that it just outputted doctor instead of Dr. teeth. And why did that happen? This is the same thing that I've been warning you about for weeks now when you are using a CIN with string data, is it does not account for those space characters, those new line characters, in the way that you're expecting. So we cannot use just a simple read operation like you see here on lines number 46, 47, and 48. We have to use a get line like I've been warning you about pretty much since like session 3. So one more thing to mention here that I have on line number 56, I close that file. So I open the file on 43, I do the data that I need, or get the data that I need, I make my displays, and then I close the file. Frankly speaking, what I should and could and will do here is I'm going to cut that line, and as soon as I have read in from file, on lines 46, 47, and 48, I'm going to close that file. So you'll see I've run it again. There's no change in my output here, and I have saved microseconds here in the display, the execution of those 3 lines of code. I have saved that time that file was open. So this is even more compact and even better than spreading out the opening and the closing of, where did I close you? The opening and the closing, here it goes. The opening and the closing of, in this case, it is input file. There it is. So just a note there. So if we scroll down here, this, starting on lines 60 and below, is where we can address the issue of reading from a file, but reading in string data that accounts for that space character in between doctor and teeth. He did not go to jazz school for 8 years to be called Mr. Teeth. He went to Muppet Jazz School for 8 years to be called Dr. Teeth. So what we have here is on line number 69, we're going to infile.open our names data.txt. So this little while loop, so you've already seen while loops in the previous portion of our chapter 5 materials. So what I'll tell you is this is what's happening here inside of my while loop. So inside of the parens for my while loop, I have a get line. So you'll recognize that get line from using strings, frankly, to this point. And then I have infile, comma, s. So that infile, you'll remember, is the name of my if stream variable. So this object here is called infile. So what I'm saying is, as long as there's a line for me to read in infile, I'm going to save that to a string called s. And that string I have way up here on line number 10, and I declared it, and it's remained empty. But I declared it way up here on line number 10 when I had my string for name 1, name 2, and name 3. So what happens here is as follows, and I'll go through these 3 lines because I feel as though they are fast enough for us to be able to do that. So the first time around, get line in file that I can read from the file and save that variable's value to s. So the first time through, it goes and it looks at line number 0, and there is something in that line. It's Bert. So it reads that into s, and I see out s with a comma after it. So next, we go back up to the start of my while loop, and I check again. Can I get a line from infile? Yes. This time around, it's line number 2, which is Ernie. Read that into s, output s, come back up to the top of my while loop. Do it again. Can I get something from that file? Yes. In this case, it's Dr. Teeth. Doctor, so DR, the space character, and then teeth. So again, I can read that in because there is a line here. So it's read into S, we output S and the comma, and then we keep going. So I'll just point you here at namesdata.txt. You'll notice there are only those three lines, 1, 2, and 3, which really should be 0, 1, and 2. So once C++ has gotten to here, there is no line number 4. There is nothing to read after Dr. Teeth. So back here at main.cpp, we come back up to our while loop and we evaluate this for truth. Can we get a line from infile to store into S? Nope, that becomes false. Great, get out. So you're booted out of that while loop. In normal program flow, you would go to line, it's after line 74, so we go to 75, empty line. We go to line 76, infile.close. We close the file and bloop, we're out of that loop. So this is how we deal with inputs and outputs from a file. I'll just highlight again, and you can run this as many times as you would like to be able to see how and why these happen. So remember, we have an if stream because we are reading in from a file. If stream is input file stream. Now, we've got variables to be able to read that value into. For the second time around, I've got string variables that I'm going to use. So the first time is ints, the second time is strings. It doesn't matter to C++. You want C++ to read a line from a file? It can read a line from a file. It can read any of our cardinal data types, integers, characters, booleans, doubles, floats, etc. It can read strings. Later on, when we get into 277, so the advanced C++, will be able to read objects from our files. No problem. We can set it up to be able to do so. So line number 13, we open our file. So we open the stream so that we can read in to our system. Here on lines 16, 17, and 18, C++ maintains that for us. So it is moving down on those lines of code, in those lines of our file, and we don't have to manage that. We can, but we will not manage where that playhead, the read head, or the write head. So what line of the file it is that we wish to read, we're not going to do that here in C++. We're going to do that in advanced C++ when you come back next semester. And remember again, as soon as I'm done with my file, I want to close it because I want that file to be accessible to any other process or person that needs it, as opposed to forcing the system to give them a read-only copy or creating an environment where I have no way of determining if that file is even accurate anymore, because if more than one process can open it, it can be unchanged, it can be added to, it can be deleted from, and that means that all of my data becomes bad there. So reading from a file here in our first example, we'll continue on to see outputting to a file.